Dear Heavenly Father, I'd just like to thank you for everything that you've given us. I'd like to thank you for this time that you have given me and John with Lucas, and I hope that we, and as well as everybody listening, keep their ears open to see if there's anything that they can learn from him. I also ask, Lord, and I pray that you watch over Lucas, you watch over his family, you watch over me and John and everybody that is listening to this podcast. And Lord, of course, please forgive us for all our sins. And in Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen.
What is up, guys? And welcome back to the Skeptics Podcast, episode 29. I just had to make sure everything was coming through good. We got a guest for this podcast. It's going to be pretty awesome. The tradition is, though, we have to ask John Boy how he's going. That's the start of everything. So, John Boy, for the 29th, family member in-house.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Doing pretty good. I'm feeling super blessed today. I'm glad to have my brother here. So, I think this should be a really good episode. A couple of my favorite guys. So
Right.
Yeah.
Start off, what's the one thing you guys fight about more than anything? I'm just kidding. You don't have to answer that. You don't have to answer that.
Zero distance for my rifle.
Yeah.
That's a good one, actually.
I would actually say we probably have a big difference of opinion on setups, on how we do, whether it be a self-defense setup or some sort of combat loadout. That's probably our biggest differences there. Yeah. I'm more of a, what's that sweet spot that I can make the most bang for my buck, and I think John's more of a specialist. He has goals set in mind for his setups, but he also has a little bit more of a broader range than I do. I have a very specific niche. I want it to work inside 200 yards every time.
Right.
I want it to work to my advantage and the things that I'm most comfortable with. So.
Right.
That's a great discussion, and we need to definitely bring that back. But Lucas, for everybody out there that's listening, if you could just give like a 5-minute spiel, like kind of who you are, how you kind of grew up, what you do now. If just like some people call it like the Uber talk, like you get in an Uber and you just got to explain to them in 5 minutes kind of who you are. What would you kind of say?
Okay, yeah, I'm familiar with the concept. So, we do bios when we talk about getting promotions and stuff in the military. So I can give you a little bit of a rundown. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Lucas Reeves. I'm John's brother. Just to start off, I grew up in multiple different places. Before John was born, my parents lived in Bald Knob. My mom and biological father moved to Indianapolis. So we stayed there for a few years. John was born. Unfortunately, my parents split up, or I guess I say our parents split up, moved back to Arkansas with our mom. I'd say John was 2 and I was about 8. Our mother remarried to our stepdad. We'll just call him Dad, male. In 3rd grade, moved to Payburn. I've been there ever since. Graduated Payburn High School as kind of I'd say middle of the road student. I would definitely say I think I have a aptitude for learning, but I'm at that time. You're young and you don't have maybe necessarily the discipline to learn. I went to college at ASU BB. There I got 2 associate degrees while enlisting in the military. Became a 68 Whiskey. So I was a medic for the 39th Infantry Brigade, 2nd Battalion out of Searcy. During that time, I met my wife, Ashley, at BB. Finished with a bachelor's degree in health administration from Jonesboro. Commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant in the Arkansas National Guard. Moved to 77th Aviation Brigade. Got on full time. I've actually done multiple jobs for the military, but as of right now, I'm the operations/training officer for 1st and 114th Aviation SNS Battalion. I fly the Blackhawk, but I'm also qualified to fly Lakota, the UH-72, LUH-72, and the UH-60 Blackhawk, Lima. So I fly the old one with the steam gauges. My wife's, we're dual military. She's a logistician for the state. She runs our e-Flipple program, so that's field loss. So anytime a piece of equipment is lost, she runs the background procedures and SOPs for how that's going to be accounted for, whether or not, unfortunately, the soldier has to pay for it or they chalk it up to a legitimate loss, something happened, it broke, whatever. She runs that for the state. And then I have an 18-month-old son, and I have twin girls that are a month old right now. I think that's kind of the big spiel of what's the end-all, be-all for me.
Right. The kind of jumping into kind of the start. So we all went to school with each other. We all went to Payburn.
Yeah.
Lucas is just a couple years older than me, and then John Boy is a couple years younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
When you were growing up, where was the urge to join the military in there?
I would like to say it's kind of always just been a thing. I was a big fan, even from a very young age, I loved Army men, loved machine guns. I just had a fascination with the idea in general. Our biological father, before he passed away, had talked about joining the military as well, and it kind of got me started. I was kind of curious about the idea. After his passing, I started talking to our dad, Mel. He was in the 90s.
Yes.
He was a 25 series. He was Camo in the 90s. Our grandpa was a hydraulic mechanic in the Air Force. Our great grandfather was he was in the armored division during World War II. Also forgot grandpa also while he was in the Air Force, he was in Vietnam. So it's just being around it a whole bunch, and you kind of already having the thought in the back of your mind, like, man, this is just something I could do. And I got out of high school, was going to college. I paid for one semester and was like, man, I really don't know how I'm going to keep going. And that's kind of where it was solidified. I was like, I can join the military. I've already been thinking about it. They're going to pay for school, and it's going to fast track me to where I want to be. And originally, the idea was I started off as a medic, and I wanted to become a physician's assistant. As things have transpired, I went for a bachelor's in health administration, planning to put in a application for the IPAP program, which is the Army's PA program. At that time, though, I'd commissioned and become a pilot, or I had commissioned into aviation with the goal to go through flight school and become a pilot. Upon graduating and coming back, the amount of work that we do, our operational tempo here in the state of Arkansas is extremely high. I didn't realize the amount of work that the aviation community does here in the state. We all know that the National Guard works disasters. We're here to help the communities and do outreach programs. My experience generally was the winter storms. Mm-hmm. Those medics and infantrymen are out there pulling people out of ditches and helping clear roads. Aviation does so much more. Firefighting capabilities. We do Bambi buckets, dump water. I'm Bambi certified. We do search and rescues. The medevac units have FLIR, front-looking infrared, so they have thermal. They can see, so they'll look for downed aircraft whenever the state calls. The AHART team, the civilian medicine guys out of Fort Smith, we train with them currently. We do so much more flights. Let's say they're the tornadoes that happen in the Northeast. They need a survey. Okay, we'll do an aerial survey. State signs off. These civilian packs get the back of our aircraft and conduct these flights. So the op tempo is just extremely high. And then on top of that, we have our M-Day soldiers that are drill soldiers. They come in, and then we still do our combat operations and preparations during drill weekend once a month. So just all that to say, we're operating at a vast level. And so it's kind of taken up a lot of my time, and you learn to, and again, as I'm growing older too, I'm also becoming more, you think you're a professional, but you slowly start to actually perceive yourself, right? It's almost like looking in the mirror. You take time to step back and observe what your actions are, and you learn to be more professional as you go. And it's definitely one of those things. It's a hard road. I got through college, and college is what it is. I hate to be this way, but if you can get up to the class and you can study the material to even a mediocre degree, you're going to pass.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people, if they just put the effort into it, they should do well. The military is not – there's some things that, hey, it's a participation kind of ordeal. Mm-hmm. Just strap your boots every day and get out there and go. And then there's sometimes I went through flight school during COVID, mm-hmm. and it was like, here's this manual on how this engine runs. I want you to read this manual on how this engine runs, and then next week you're going to take a test.
Wow. And
so there's a lot of onus on the soldier and the individual, like, how bad do you want to be here?
Yeah, there's a guy who I like his post that I follow, and he does Navy EOD, and he has guys DMing him all the time, saying, dude, what's your biggest piece of advice to make it through EOD for Navy? And he said, it's easy to pass, but it's even easier to fail. So it's really, I mean, it's going to be hard, yes. You have to put in the hours. But what he's getting at is, like, if you put in that effort, you can pass. But it's even easier to let it slip. Yeah. So.
Also, since we're talking about military, I know people are probably seeing me, if you're watching this on YouTube, just letting you know I'm on parental leave. So the beard and stuff, yes, I'm out of regulations technically by AR 670-1. But as soon as I come back off of my leave for my kids, I'll be back in uniform, shaved up, and looking the part. So just don't come after me in the comments.
Oh, so before you went in with the original role of a medic.
Yes, I did.
Where did I'm obsessed with health stuff. So, and I don't find a lot of people that is. Mm-hmm. So where did that come from?
So, funny story. I was doing medical classes. I wanted to work in medicine to some degree in high school, and I was taking medical classes through the AP program. So, like medical terminology, I already had that college credit in high school. The MASH program, which was a thing they were doing at White County, what do they call it now? When I was in school, it's the White County Medical Center. Unity. Yeah. So the Unity Hospital here, during the summer, you could do an internship while you were still in high school, and you got to scrub in as if you were like an LPN, like a nurse. And so I went up there, and I volunteered. I actually helped to go observe in some surgeries and a few other things, and I just always found the medical field fascinating. And I thought that I could get some good training as a medic, and also I had a few friends that were infantry, and I was like, man, this is a great way to kind of dual hat and do some other things and get your certs, because whenever you come out of 68 Whiskey School, you're automatically EMTB, so EMT basic, and then obviously there's an advanced, and then you can go into paramedicine, which all of our flight medics are paramedics. So started off there. I was really interested in medical in general, and then I got into it, and I really fell in love with, again, being a professional and helping. The idea is that my job is to be an expert at what I do, because someone's life depends on it. You are the first responder in the worst scenario.
Right.
GWAT days, what we call coin or counterinsurgency, you had that golden hour. As long as I could get the soldier off the X, work on them, and I was to standard, and I knew what I was doing, you had a pretty good window. You had that golden hour that you could get an aircraft down there, put them on a bird, and get them back to where they needed to be. And I took that very seriously. It's a little different now in LSCO. Large-scale combat operations, we're not going to see that same kind of treatment care. It'll be a lot of back to old school World War II style, where the medic's going to do what he can, and he's going to have to some degree, do it's been so long since I talked about it. We call it DIME, or delayed, immediate, minimal, and expectant. He's going to have to triage. You got to do triage and determine what he can actually work on, and unfortunately, who's worth, or not worth, everyone's worth saving, but who he can save on the battlefield. So, but there's a lot of that discussion, and it's one of those honest things you need to talk about. Again, that's something I was going to bring up today, is like, your morals and ethics and values. And when it comes to those tough scenarios, you need to be righteous with yourself and whatever higher power you believe in. I'm a follower of Christ, so did I do right by that person, and did I do right by my own morals and values? And so that was something that I had to have honest conversations with about, because at the end of the day, you are their last ditch effort in a very, very bad situation. But that's just kind of how I started. And when you work with a light infantry unit, it's different because I showed up to the unit, they put me on an ambulance. I may have worked on an ambulance maybe 2 months. You can just tell. There are some guys that, not to beat down on people, but that they're not as fit. They're not out there, giving it 110%. And a lot of the times those guys got pulled off the line and they got put in an ambulance or they got put in the aid station. It's more of a sedentary role. Triage in the back of an ambulance, you're just doing the best you can, but it's just you keeping them stable on the go. There's not a lot of moving and maneuvering, so to speak. Did that for, like I said, maybe 2 months. Then I moved to treatment for a minute. There's a whole backstory on why I got moved to treatment, but got moved to treatment. I was underneath my actual platoon sergeant at the time. Got some good training in there. Understood, like, hey, it's more of a clinic than it is like an actual field environment. So you got to kind of mind your P's and Q's a little bit better. And then after that, I got moved out to the line units. I hit Alpha Company, 2nd and 153 out of Walnut Ridge. I worked with them for a summer. I worked on a couple. That was actually the first time I ever worked on someone. I thought a machine gun had blown up in a dude's face during a live fire exercise. Come to find out, it was just a bloody nose. So I was extremely happy to, when I walked up to him, he didn't say anything. His whole face was just covered in blood. And I was like, oh, whoa. And then I wiped him down with some gauze, and I just realized it was a bloody nose. So I just plugged him up and was like, and of course, the average infantry soldier, he was like, hey, Doc, I'm good. Can I just keep rolling? I was like, hey, brother, as long as you're good with it, keep on rocking. Yeah. I'm right here behind you. But did that for a little while. I went to Delta Company for, again, maybe a couple months, which is they're the mounted infantry unit here out of BB. So they have tow missiles. They're like anti-tank and stuff like that. Have the Crow system. Then I moved to where I stayed for the longest was the reconnaissance unit, scout snipers. Again, when I had enlisted, I was 6 foot and 160 pounds. I mean, I was thin. I was lightweight, and I was pretty maneuverable. Ran with them for a good while, and then during school, I went through ROTC to become a cadet. I went through Mountain Warfare School, got certified there. I had done so many just weird, odd things that it had transpired, and it all really started just because I was kind of the guy that wanted to raise his hand, I'll do whatever you want, I'll go wherever, I'll train on anything, cross load. So it's just a weird experience. I had no intention of actually going to any crazy schools or doing anything out of the ordinary. I think just I'll give credit to a lot of my first line leaders. They just noticed that I was a little more gung-ho than others. That's just kind of really that's what it all boils down to, is how bad do you want it, or what do you want?
Right. I remember seeing, I think it was Rob O'Neill that was talking about it, because I always wondered, and I'm sure a lot of people did before they ever went in, you talk about trying to be as fit as possible before you go into your boot camp and everything, and Rob O'Neill was like, if you want it, you want it. He was like, you'll make it. Mm-hmm. And so I always thought that was interesting, but you said something a little bit there about the mountain warfare training.
Yes.
What's that like?
Oh, Mountain Warfare School. So it's been a while since I've been. I think I went in 2017. So the school's changed a little bit. I talked to another buddy of mine that just got back. But essentially, there's the schoolhouse is the Mountain Warfare School, and they have 5 different classes you can take. Most of us all go to the basic military mountaineering course. It's a 2-week course. You go up to Vermont. You show up. They're going to teach you rappel, climbing, spelunking techniques. It's essentially small unit tactics in a mountainous terrain. And there's actually my favorite day was where you shot from one mountaintop to another mountaintop, where you were trying to gauge a distance and engage with a 5.56 with an ACOG. It's a pretty amazing feat. But you go up there, it's pretty fast paced. I would say that I'm not going to say it's a extremely hard school, but it's definitely one that you don't take lightly. You ruck up a mountain every day, and then obviously you have whatever your day-to-day tasks are going to be up there. You could not fall behind the main group more than 5 minutes. If you did, it was a point. You had 10 points total. If you dropped below, I think it was 5 points, you were kicked out. I fell behind on like day 3, and I got my ride up. And after that, I was like, I will not be written up again. And there's some more stuff that goes into that. So like, I didn't really understand. Again, I'm young. I'm maybe 21 at the time. E4. Don't really understand the expectation, and I was kind of just doing my own thing. And it's a team event. You don't really understand, but like, if you have your team and you get close with them, hey, if you're a slower guy, then you start at the front. Go start at the front of it, and then if you fall back, it gives you, and you're stretched out over a quarter mile, well, it gives you some time, some slinky time to keep you still in the game. That was one thing. I think the day I actually got rode up was the day that I was carrying the medical equipment. So your rucksack immediately with just your water, your food, and the climbing and rappelling equipment was 70 pounds.
Whoa.
So then the day that you got hit with the medical, but you had your CLS bag, and then you had the Skedco on top of that. So like, I think my packing it up that day being like over 140. And it's just one of those things. It's just how bad do you want it, or how hard are you willing to ruck? And of course, I got smart to it. So every time it was my day to carry, I was like, hey, I want to be at the front of the group. And I had some really good dudes up there. There was like 5 SF guys in my team. And so they understood what I was getting at, and they're like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, we got you. And they would sprace out, and there was just a lot more team effort once you kind of got to know the guys, and I quit being an individual. And again, that all comes with learning. But yeah, you go through, you do some rappelling, you'll do some rock wall climbing over some cliffs, you do some regular grade 5 climbing, you do a night rappel, which that's fun. If it's a low illume night, you're having a rough time. You do, there's a spelunking event, or there's like a little, it's not really a cave, it's just like someone stuck a covert about 10 foot down, and then they drop the water cans in there, and that's your water for the day. So then you make a little like teepee, like you'd put over a fire that you'd put like hang your pots on. Well, you make a big one. You learn how to lash those together and set it up, and then you'll put a carabiner on there, and then one person has to get lowered down. And of course, I'm mildly claustrophobic, so of course it was me that went down that day. You hook the cans into you, and then the guys actually pull you back up. And you learn some other stuff too. You learn how to do a high line, which is kind of like a zip line. You'll learn how to do a 3-to-1 hauling system, like if you're going to pull a speedball bag up the side of a mountain, a resupply up the side of a mountain. And then you got 3-to-1 hauling system. You have your high line. Oh man, I know there's another system we get taught. I wish I'd brought my book with me. But you get taught so much, and like I said, it's 2 weeks. Like, it's really on you to be professional. And if you make it past day 3, if you make it past the smoke session, they'll take you to a ski slope where it's like straight up and down the mountain, and then they just run you up and down the mountain to see if you'll quit. If you make it past that, as long as you work as a team and you're really dedicated, you'll make it fine. But it was good. I learned a lot about small unit tactics. I learned some good mountaineering training, and the knots. You learn 16 different knots. I've used them multiple times. That school actually sets you up for going to ranger school, because the mountain phase of ranger school uses all the same knots and stuff. So it's actually a really cool school that if you get ahead of that and you decide to go to ranger, it sets you up for a third of your ranger schools in the mountain. So, it's really good.
For anybody that doesn't understand when you say knots, what is that?
So tying knots.
Oh, so you mean physically tying a knot? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
It's extremely.
I thought you were talking about something completely different. I thought we were talking about like knots when it came to like some kind of speed or.
I can explain that too, because we talk about knots in aircraft, but I'm talking about when you're on the ground and let's say you're doing a 3-to-1 hauling system, and you've lowered some guy down and you're about to pick a patient up off of a Skedco, so now you're lifting 2 people. All right, so I got to do we'll say a figure 8 knot, or maybe it's a Prusik knot. They are extremely detail oriented. They want the knot to be what we call dressed, to where when the ropes are being ran through, they never cross, creating a friction point or creating a bend that may lower the capabilities of that rope. So when I say like learning a knot, they're like, hey, you have 30 seconds, go tie a whatever knot. A water knot or whatever it is, and it has to be dressed. It has to be pretty. It has to be clean. And the idea is the more attention to detail you have, the better your chances are surviving. Because what you don't want to have happen is your equipment fail because you didn't tie it correctly, or the bend is not correct, or you didn't have enough slack in it. So and there's a difference between different types of rope too, like static rope versus dynamic rope. So like one has a little bit of give and the other one doesn't. All of that matters, especially when you're, and again, people's lives depend on it. A bowline knot. Bowline seems real easy, right? Well, if you're trying to rappel down off of the side of a mountain and you're putting a bowline on this tree, everyone's coming off that rope. So I want to make sure that it's 100%.
Right.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
Especially when they start asking you to like set up lines in the dark. Like, hey, you're setting this up and you're about to go off the edge of this cliff. No nods, nothing. You're going blind. It matters.
Yeah.
How you tie into that matters. A munter knot, you know, it's a slow descending knot that you tie yourself into, and it allows you to rappel at a slower pace. All of that matters. A double munter, which is what we do for Casevac.
Mm-hmm.
All of it matters. And again, attention to detail is a huge thing there. It also has two phases. I went during the summer course. There's also a winter course where you do like ice wall climbing and stuff. So there's other cool stuff. I'm just not a big fan of the cold, and I don't think the state would be willing to send me back and pay for me to go for a school that honestly we don't have a lot of operational environment for. Right.
Right.
I have no intention of scaling Sugarloaf under ice. You know.
Right. With the people that you've encountered in the military, how long you been in the military for?
11 years.
So with the people that you've encountered, and we all know there's a big emphasis on teamwork. I mean, a lot. Do you find more people that is more excited and optimistic about it being in the military, or is it more going the other way? Because you were talking about in your case with on your mountain course that if you had a team that sucked, your experience would probably be in the dirt.
It is definitely harder. I wouldn't be able to give you a statistic per se or a percentage, but we like to say that our military population is a direct reflection of the civilian populace. So places here in Arkansas, there are definitely more patriotic people, and generally speaking, the pool that you're drawing from is going to be more gung-ho. They're more outdoorsy. They're definitely more in tune with that sort of thing. But the military as a whole, like, everyone's welcome. You're all welcome to join. So if your purpose to join is strictly to pay for school, or if you're just curious, maybe you didn't know where else to go, you wanted more of a family environment, there's multiple reasons to join. And they may not always align with everyone else's purpose. But the idea is you join, and over time, that's where that shared bond comes from doing exercise and stuff together. Yeah, it's growing pains. I would say a good portion of our force used to be, GWAT days. So people that still remembered 9/11, and it was extreme patriotism, and they were here to come in and fight for their country and do their job. I'm not saying that's not still a thing now, but a lot of young people. I was a company commander for Bravo 777, an aviation support battalion company, so we did maintenance on aircraft on 60s. There were younger soldiers that we're seeing come through basic and AIT. They had more, again, we all are individuals to a degree, but it was more of it's about me mentality. I'm not in basic training anymore, so like I think I deserve X, Y, and Z. They just had more of a me thing. Mm-hmm. And some of them they're more malleable, and they want to become part of the team, and it's easier to do. And then some, unfortunately, whether they're stuck in their ways or maybe they don't fully understand, they don't see the big picture, they're harder to get there. But I would say in the end, I would think that all of us, or a vast majority of us, are all on the same team, and we do want to work together. I've had several experiences with soldiers that, to them, it was just a side job. I'm only here 2 days a month. It's not really my main priority. And that's fine. I'm not asking you to come out here and not get paid and do extra work. But what I am asking of you is to sit down with me I want to hear what your expectations of the unit is, and then obviously I'm going to tell you our expectations. And we do council statements, and I'm going to explain to you the expectation of you as the soldier and how you fit into the larger picture. I think today's age, when I first got in, it was you're to take your marching orders. You don't ask questions. There is not the reason why, there is but to do and die. Today's age, with the spread dispersion of leadership down to the lowest level, you're seeing a lot more of your lower enlisted asking the question why, and I think it is incumbent upon the leadership to say why. If they understand the bigger picture, then I don't necessarily have to tell them how to skin the cat. I just tell them what the results are. I give them a left and right limit and let them be creative. And you'll be amazed what you see out of it. Sometimes it comes easy. Those soldiers are extremely ready and they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and some are a little more apprehensive because maybe they had a rough life, maybe some things had set them back. But you just got to talk with them. I found more often than not, if you take the time to talk to the soldier, you'll understand their reasoning why they are or why they act the way they do, and you'll get a lot more out of them than just being a hammer and just being, and all the soldiers are the nails. So I would say vast majority of everyone is here and we're all on the same page, especially after post-deployment. Half my unit went on a deployment a couple years ago. When they all returned, you could definitely tell who had spent 365 days in close proximity together, right? They already knew each other's quirks.
Right.
They already knew how to operate. And then also, as an officer, as a company commander, it's also your duty to see that. Like, okay, these guys are tight-knit. We need to reintegrate them into the rest of the team, because while they're gone, the world didn't stop. I came in, they saw a previous captain. When they come back, there's a younger captain who's new, fresh. Well, I say captain. Actually, when I took command, I was a lieutenant. I was a first lieutenant when I took command, and so it's like, ooh, who's this young kid, So I think it's very important for leaders to recognize, like, there is a transition period, and you need to be able to be flexible and reintegrate on both sides of the house. Those soldiers need to come back and have some sort of stability. And the soldiers that are here that have been working hard as a team and building their own version of rapport need to also accept those people that have been on deployment back in and kind of find where that mesh needs to happen. A lot of people come back from deployment, they're generally high-strung, albeit from whatever their environment was, right? And so you want to make sure they come back, and that's also where the experience and the knowledge is, right? They've been doing it nonstop. And the soldiers that have stayed back are only doing it 2 days a month. And so finding that give and take is a huge thing, both not only at the company commander level, but between your first sergeants and your section sergeants. Right. So, like I said, it's a reflection of the population. You got to figure out how that melting pot needs to work. And I hope that a lot of the junior leaders that are coming out understand why we say what we say. Again, I think leaving COIN and going back into LISCO, we are going to have to be a little more direct with our orders, just because of the way the fight works on a near peer. But at the end of the day, I honestly do think that the junior soldier, the boots on the ground, is where we make the most money, and letting them grow. And so you've got to be able to, as a commander, whether it be at company or battalion level, see that and work through it. And I'll admit, like, I also had my mistakes too as an officer. There were times where I was extremely lenient, and I just let it go for so long that then I wanted to turn around and tell the soldier, like, hey, no, we're not doing this. And unfortunately, I was jumping from one extreme to the other, and it's just not. I don't think that was good for the soldier. I don't think it was good. Looking back on it now, I don't think it was good for the soldier. I don't think it was good for my command philosophy. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually glad that I had a lieutenant colonel, battalion commander there to, like, pull me aside. Like, hey, I know you're generally a high-strung guy anyway because the op tempo is real high, but I think you need to sleep on what you're thinking about right now. And sure enough, I came back to the table the next day, and we all had to come to Jesus meeting with the soldier, and I think everyone left better for it. Shout out to that lieutenant colonel. I don't know if I'm not gonna say his name. I don't know what his anonymity needs to be, but great piece of advice. I try to be as patient as I can. I just, you get prodded enough, you kind of get to the point where you're kind of over it. And I'm glad he told me just, hey, you need to step away and come back to the table later. And the soldier also owned up to some of their mistakes as well. And I just think it was a good learning environment for everyone. And again, I was a junior. We talk about the span of the military. A lot of people don't get company command lieutenant. It's not a common thing. The Arkansas National Guard it's a weird environment. We go through these ebbs and flows where we have an influx of too many officers, so now everyone's scrambling for a job and a position, and they want all the cool guy stuff. And then there are times where, man, we've lost a lot of officers due to ETS or getting out or attrition, whatever the case may be. And then it's like, oh, I don't have enough captains for command. We're just going to stick whatever lieutenant we think can get the job done. Mm-hmm. And of course, I'm like I said, I'm generally one of the guys, like, I'll raise my hand, like, I'll try it. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll get in there and I'll learn. And it was a great learning experience. You go from a flight unit where I was doing air assault missions, and we were learning tactics and techniques in the aircraft, and then I moved to a non-flying maintenance unit, and it was like, hey buddy, these are all the guys behind the scenes that make you capable of doing what you do. And you find out you learn a great appreciation for those specialists and PFCs that come back from school, and that guy's the guy that's putting your engine back together. That's the man or woman that's doing a blade test to make sure your blade's not going to snap off mid-flight. You definitely learn a great appreciation for the hidden individuals that work in shops that aren't out there on the flight line.
Right. I've been begging to ask you this question since John told me you were going to come on, and I think you told me a little bit about it before. But with all the experience and the knowledge that you have now of flying Blackhawks and different helicopters, mm-hmm. what do you think about that helicopter hitting the plane?
I want to preface with, I do not want to be a armchair quarterback. I think a lot of things happened there. We use what we call the Swiss cheese model. So I want you to imagine that each layer of Swiss cheese is a preventative measure that stops an accident from happening. Let's say, and there's so many. So there may only be 4 pieces of cheese, there may be 10 pieces of cheese between that accident. But when all the holes line up and you miss every one of those preventative steps, that's when accidents happen. So I think it was a culminating event of a lot of things. We heard, hey, air traffic control was down a man. Washington, D.C. is an extremely high traffic area. And that's a whole other thing going into air traffic control. Like, the way it was explained to me is that air traffic controller is throwing up 10 dimes in the air, and he's trying to sort them and stack them before they hit the ground. Wow. So that gentleman that man or woman is in there doing the best that they can to try to talk. Oh, by the way, once you get so close, air traffic control now has to hand you off to tower, and tower also has to be tracking you. Those are not the same thing. And so the aircraft was doing, it was on approach, it was on final, it was doing what it was supposed to do. The air traffic controller, from what I remember, was saying, like, hey, look out for the aircraft in front of you. But from what I was told, there was multiple aircraft in the area, so they may have been looking at the wrong one. I don't know if they were wearing night vision or not, and that's a whole other deal. Night vision, it's monochromatic, so it's one color. It's either your old greens or your new whites. Well, guess what? When I'm looking through the tubes, the anti-collision, the green and red anti-collision lights on aircraft look like blinking white lights, like anything else on a house or whatever.
Right.
So you can't really tell unless you look up underneath your goggles and you're like, oh, that's a different color. Is
that a pretty common thing, wearing nods when flying a helicopter at night?
So my requirements, every 6 months I'm required to do 12 hours NG, 9 hours MG, 1 hour unaided, and 2 hours of hood or weather, be in the clouds. Don't kill me, guys, for messing that up. But so 9 hours NG in a 6 month period, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but after you've done it for multiple years, I don't know, I've probably got over 100. I mean, over 100 hours under goggle. But yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you? The idea behind it for most of us is you're already flying at night. Why wouldn't you wear goggles? That's a performance enhancement, right? Otherwise, you're flying in the black and you're just having to look at your instruments and look at the ground lights and make sure you're not confusing ground lights with stars. And then it's even, again, it's intensified whenever you're wearing something that only gives you one color. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I don't know. Like I said, also how you set it up. Like, I don't know what their experience. I mean, I do know what their experience level to a degree was, but I don't know what their comfortability level was with night vision. I set mine up. Everyone sets theirs up different too. So the way I set mine up is when I'm flying, my head is actually looking down directly at the instruments, and then my night vision are actually parallel to the windscreen. So I don't ever move my head. Really, I mean, I do. I'm looking around and I'm checking my area. But what I'm saying is like when I'm looking forward, I can look down and see my instruments on a normal colored panel, and I can just look my eyes up and see straight out and look. And it also affords me the ability that if I want to look under my nods, I just simply pull my head straight, and now I'm looking underneath.
Right.
It's a technique. It's not a requirement. I just like it that way. It makes it easier on me. And the same goes for like when you're coming in on final or whatever, you know, as you're checking, especially if it's a cross runway, you're coming on 2-2 and there's a 0, or we'll just say you're coming on a 3-6 and there's a 2-7, right? There's a cross one. Well, if you're coming down visually, I would hope that either the guy on the co-pilot on the left and the right, they're still, even though you're cleared on runway, I would hope that you're still looking down your adjacent runways,
Right.
or perpendicular runways, and you're making sure you're clearing before you cross. It's just, there's just a lot to it. There's a lot to it. The aircraft was outside the corridor. They were like 250 feet outside the corridor they were supposed to be in. There was
that was my next question, is how often, because that was a public airport, wasn't it?
Yes.
How often does military people run tests or whatever inside a public airspace versus like
all the time?
It is all the time.
It is like, so you can actually, the National Guard can actually be mobilized to DC, and they fly command. We call it command and control or VIP movement. But I mean, a whole company can be deployed out there. Let's say 10 aircraft can be doing day-to-day operations at any given time out of Washington D.C.
Gotcha.
Those corridors are extremely high traffic, and also, again, corridors are designed to like mitigate so that you're not hitting each other. But also, it's a corridor, so surprise, surprise, if that's the only military aircraft corridor, I'm going to have to share that with the other military aircraft. So
Right.
There may be 3, and I don't know what their local techniques and procedures are, but that corridor may have hey, you're going to stay right side of this corridor at 80 feet if you're moving outbound, and if you're coming inbound, you're on this side of the corridor at this altitude. So you're also doing inside the corridor deviations for the other aircraft. I mean, because that's your operating area. And then, we have standard FAA regulations like, hey, all rotary wing traffic is supposed to be opposite of whatever the fixed wing traffic is doing at whatever airport. Oh, by the way, your standard air traffic pattern is 700 feet AGL. That's above ground level. And so whatever that converts to, so like you'll figure out, hey, I'm 700 feet above the ground. I look down, MSL, it says I'm at 1,100 feet. So that's my traffic pattern. But again, and I'm sure that they did all of that stuff. And I know that they were doing an NVG check ride. So like you're sitting there being evaluated by somebody, like, hey, this is your annual eval to prove that you know what you're doing on goggles. That other person was the evaluator. They may have had their head down. They may have been checking some stuff off on their knee board. I don't know. And so, again, I don't want to put the blame on anyone. It's just all the holes lined up. One person may have been inside. The other person was like, hey, I'm looking at this aircraft, thinking that's the one I'm going to be looking at, not the one that's right here. It's just so high traffic. There's so much going on. And if you're really not, and that's the other thing too, like fatigue gets us. I don't know what their duty day was. If it was beyond a 12-hour duty day, who signed off on that? Was it low illume? Was there no moon out? My goggles are only good to a certain degree it needs external illumination. There's just too many factors, and I really feel for them because one of the things that really kind of got under my skin was all of the speculation on social media like Facebook and Instagram. It was like, oh, it's they immediately jumped to like inexperienced, whatever, yada yada yada, and you can be skeptical. I'm not saying you should be able to question things.
Right.
I would just say have a little grace. Don't go out there and just start beating up. They didn't want to release the names either at first for the sake of the families. If you're going to go out there and do your research and you do find out who it is or whatever, take some time, sit back, say, hey, have some grace. Something happened. Wait for some more details to come out. Because you don't know. You really don't. It could have been someone else's brother, sister, mother, and you want to still, you need to act as though it's one of your family members and give them the respect and diligence that they need, because it can happen to anyone. Anything can happen. I mean, you can be flying around and something can go wrong, and it's due to no fault of you. Bird strikes happen all the time. I'm not gonna say engines just flame out, but like real stuff happens. I can teach a monkey to fly, but guess what? The reason why we do all the stuff we do, and why we have so many process procedures, is not because flying necessarily is hard. It's what to do in the instance of an emergency. Teaching you to fly straight and level and teaching you to hover, I could probably teach you in 2 weeks. Now, you going out and learning all the emergency procedures that come along with it, you go reading the FAR-AIM, the Federal Aviation Regulations, and understanding what you're authorized to do in and out of certain classes of airspace and what the requirements are to enter that said airspace, that's on you to understand. And also, those books are updated it seems like every other month. I feel like I'm having to get a new updated version of all these pubs. We carry iPads and pubs around with us all the time, whether it be digital or paper. We have all this stuff backed up, and we're constantly learning and having to reread because things change. That's something else too. Make sure your pubs are up to date. If the corridor, I'm sure it didn't, but in theory, if the FAA came out and said, hey, that corridor had changed to a different altitude, and you didn't know, I mean that's also another way for incidents to happen. So it's just so complicated. I truly think it was an honest accident. I don't think there was any foreign actors. I don't think there was any craziness going on. I saw that there was a whole other conspiracy theory, because the now Sikorsky has the Blackhawks that fly themselves.
Yeah.
It's like I hear you, but come on, man. Let's
to put that one to rest, because you've got the experience of flying. How hard would it be to make that happen?
What, to fly in another aircraft?
Yeah, into a flying plane, but you're in a helicopter.
Big sky, little bullet. I mean, it's crazy to think, but I guess your highest chance of it happening is at an airport. But I mean, the reality is, we say all the time, big sky, little bullet, but aircraft accidents happen.
Oh yeah.
More often than not. And again, it can just happen. Sometimes it's as simple as one aircraft is transitioning through the air and they're not at the right altitude, and one guy's taking off, vice versa. Maybe someone's descending. I hate to say it, general aviation is probably the most dangerous thing. And I say that meaning people that get their private pilot's license in a Cessna. Nothing against them, but I think the minimum requirement is 50 hours. Man, that's quite a lot of
number.
To me it is. But you're putting a lot of faith in something that you're very, very new in. You want to go out and do a cross country to go fly to Branson, and you've got 50 hours, and you're just now kind of getting your wits about you. Man, that's a hard one.
Right.
We leave flight school with I left flight school with 140 hours in 2 separate aircraft, and I was in some crazy air traffic. Cairns Army Airfield out in it's not Enterprise. It's Delville, Alabama. It is the world's busiest heliport because it is where we train all of our basic helicopter skills in the Army. I mean, it's tons of aircraft. Man, when you're trying to be sequenced into that and you just see everyone buzzing around, you're like, hey, like I'm number, and again, it's all visual. A lot of this is visual. So you're talking to tower, like, hey, I'm number one. Or they'll tell you you're number one. Hey, you're number two. You're sequenced behind this. They're 2 miles ahead of you. Hey, visual. I have visual on number one. I'm coming on runway 36 behind, so-and-so. Oh, by the way, it's like anything else in school, right? Like you have your normal, like, 8 classes a day. Well, that's kind of how it was. Like, hey, this group's going to go fly from 8 to noon. Well, now it's however fast you take off, and now you're having to be sequenced in and out. And, you still have a downtime, too, just like getting out of school. So now everyone's coming back in at the same time. So I've been in those high traffic areas, and it's just it happens faster than you think. I've actually seen multiple incidences where general aviation, where it's a Cessna, hey, I'm not in a class, I'm in class G. I'm not required to actually talk to anybody. I'm just kind of snooping and pooping out over, the middle of nowhere, Arkansas. Okay, that's cool. But the guy that doesn't see you and he's coming into, I don't know, Russellville, man, if you're traveling at the same altitude and you're not talking, he just happen to not see you, and they're not required to have ADS-B, which is how we can see you on the iPad. So that's something else I really think people need to be doing is ADS-B. I turned my little, I can't think of the name of it. I turned my device on. It links up to my iPad. I can see everyone else that has ADS-B. It shows me what their altitude is and where they're at, almost like what air traffic control sees. And then they can see me, and vice versa. I think that's we have that in this day and age. I think everyone should have it.
Is that the app anybody can get?
So the app is ForeFlight.
Okay.
But once it hooks in, once it Wi-Fi's to the Stratus, once it Wi-Fi's to the Stratus, it has ADS-B capability. So anyone that's pushing their beacon out, it'll give you their tail number and what their altitude is in relation to you. It'll say +5, which is plus 500 feet, so they're 500 feet above you. It'll show you like an arrow. It'll show you like where they're coming, how fast they're going. It's amazing, and I think we should be using. I think everyone should be using it. Now, I get it. It's expensive. It's something you have to pay for.
Yeah.
But man, the peace of mind. It helps that deconfliction, and you'd be surprised how many aircraft are actually out flying on any given day, especially here in rural Arkansas where there's only like a very few actual like classes of airspace, whether it be like B or C. There's a ton of Gulf airspace where it's just like, hey, man, as long as you've got the license, you can go, piddle around.
Right.
Ugh. You start flying through places like Conway where they have schools where they're teaching kids to fly Cessnas. Mm-hmm. I say kids, but people in general.
Yeah.
Man, I hate to say it. If I hear more than 2 people out there learning that day, I'm like, I'm going to head to a different airport.
Yeah.
Just for safety's sake. I know that I'm opposite traffic of them. I know they're doing right-hand traffic. I'm doing left. Mm-hmm. I know we're different altitudes, but still, just do you really want to, though? Do you really want to try to sequence in and try to get on final and separate yourself? Especially if there's no tower there. That's all just you talking over the same frequency. We call it a CTAF. It's just common traffic frequency. I pull up on ForeFlight. Conway's, 123.75. And you tune up like, hey, Conway traffic, I'm so-and-so, single UH-60, 5 miles to the east inbound. I'm hoping the other guy is talking and he's like, hey, hey, I'm, a single Cessna on, runway whatever about to take off. All right, cool. Well, then I'm going to, are you right traffic or you left, hey, I'm right traffic. Okay, well, I'll be left traffic. I'm going to get out your way. But all of that matters. Like, I'm hoping that the other guy is talking.
Right.
Squawking and talking, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much that goes into it. And so I hate to say it, like, again, Swiss cheese, man. If you're outside corridor or if you're, God forbid, if you're just not paying attention, stuff can happen a lot sooner than you think. Oh, you didn't do your fuel check. Oh, you forgot to do your fuel check? And now you've flown too far to get back or whatever. Hopefully most airports have fuel and there's one close to you. But, I mean, it can happen. You can run out of fuel because you're just not doing what you need to do. It's so many things. There's a lot. And that's why the Army requires it to be every aircraft's dual pilot. Civilians, private pilots, you can fly a single pilot like a Cessna or whatever.
Right.
You're running one of those Robinson R-22 helicopters, you can be single pilot. Army's like, that's a no-go. They want to up front at minimum 2 pilots. Best thing for you, though, I love a good crew chief in the back. Shout out to all the enlisted crew chiefs. Man, they're money. They're money. Hey, they're in the back. They're one more set of eyes. They can clear down for you. Like, hey, you're about to land in this random field. Hey, there's no trees below you. There's no saplings. Hey, it looks a little muddy. Maybe not put the full weight of the aircraft down just yet. Make sure you're not sinking. Hey, there's a pothole. You're going to come to do a roll-on into this field. Hey, man, hole. Pull up. Go around. And just, take back off and go around. But, man, the more people you have and the more stuff you have to talk, it's so much better. And it's so much safer.
Is there a biggest degree of helicopters like there is airplanes? Like if you take somebody that's flying a Cessna and you try to put them in a Boeing 747, the chances of them flying that's probably pretty slim.
I'm glad you brought that up. So I actually went to the C-130 simulator here in the Little Rock Air Force Base. It took me about 20 minutes to figure out how to fly. Like, not well, and not like I'm talking not doing run-ups or anything, but just learning the throttle, learning how to slip the tail, and how to bank correctly. It took me about 20 minutes. I also think
Really?
I was also talking to the instructor that I was with, and he was like, his general consensus was to go from rotary to fixed wing is easier than vice versa. And so also though I'm flying. I have started in dual turbine engine aircraft is what I started in. So if you'd have put me in like a Robinson R-22, I definitely would not have just been able to hop in to a Blackhawk and just been able to. The process and procedure is just too different. Even if you'd have gave me the manual, it would take me a couple of weeks of reading it and understanding what's going on there. Robinson R-22 also doesn't have all the advanced AFCS and stuff to help you out whenever you're flying.
Is that the one that's called the Little Bird?
No.
Okay.
You're thinking of the Little Bird that's a military aircraft. It's designed it's for special forces. It's like 160 it flies that. Yeah. The Robinson R-22 is like a civilian, just like a trainer. It's like a little 2-seat trainer. It doesn't really have the capabilities. You're a Little Bird. It's like the AH-1 or whatever. Mm-hmm. They're a whole different ballgame, man. And their systems are different too. Lakota's even different. Lakota's a rigid system, so like the way it moves forward and aft, that mast coming off the transmission is rigid. So you're actually flexing it forward and aft to make it move. Whereas like on a Blackhawk, so it's only got so much give it can give any which way. On a Blackhawk, it's fully articulated. There's hinges on everything that lets each blade flap, lead, lag, forward, backward, up, down. So when you're leaning it forward, it's those blades, that mast is just it's all on a system. And there's a whole bunch of more stuff that goes into it. Like there's actually like a natural tilt of the rotor, and like it's left wheel. It tends to lean left wheel low because of how it's canted and all these other effects that go against it. But no, the level of complexity is definitely there. But I will say, like, learning to fly again, once you kind of have the hang of it, it's not hard to fly it. It's all the other stuff.
Right.
Once they taught me like how to control torque settings and airspeeds in that C-130, I was like, okay, got it, cool. Nose needs to look like this on takeoff. Nose needs to look like that on landing. Here's the throttle settings I need to be at for this airspeed. Torque and power. Your power settings is what gets you your airspeed and your climb outs and stuff. So once you figure that out, and you kind of learn how the aircraft needs to slip and move, yeah, it's not that bad. It's all the other stuff. Like you're losing an engine, you're like, oh, well, now I need to know what's my stall speed. If I get too slow, this thing just becomes a rock. Yeah. I don't know that. I'd have to read the manual. Stuff like that. What systems can I lose and still have controllability of the aircraft? Which ones are vital? Hey, if I lose all my hydraulic fluid, like what systems do I lose? Stuff like that. Hey, I have a number one engine failure, or the compressor stalls, or I have a high-speed shaft failure. Like, what's that look like? Oh, hey, my torque went through the roof, but my power went down. That's weird. Oh, it's because the drive shaft blew on the number one. So it's showing that the engine's just going. as hard as it can go, but your actual power out, your RPM output to the transmission is nothing. You need to know what that looks like.
Have you had a really, really sketchy moment that you've been flying in or been with somebody or?
Yeah. So I've had one precautionary landing. We call them PLs. I've had one PL, and it was a stabilator failure. Or I say it was a stabilator failure. It was actually, I was looking at the system. It gave us an airspeed failure in which the stabilator wasn't automatically moving based on whatever the airspeed reading is. So the stabilator on the back of the aircraft, it goes full down, and then as you pick up speed over 40 knots, it will start to trim out and turn you into like it's a flat blade, and it's designed to, make you more aerodynamic kind of, and I'll explain the whole lawn dart thing here in a second, but, it flattens out above 40. Mm-hmm. And then as you speed up or slow down to try to help keep you level, it'll kind of like, the system automatically will kind of get it somewhere between 0 and 5 degrees. It'll just keep moving it like this to keep you level at whatever torque and airspeed you're at. Well, it's NVGs. We're coming back from Fort Smith. We're, 10 minutes outside of Russellville. And I get a master warning caution on the display, and the pilot in command that I'm with, it's like, hey, man, I was like, hey, I got a master warning caution. He's like, yeah, let me look at it. He looks down. He's like, hey, it's showing on the stabilator airspeed failure. So it couldn't read the airspeed, which means it was two things can happen. One, it stays stuck wherever it's at, which is what happened, and that's preferable. Or two, it doesn't read the airspeed and it thinks you're not going in. It thinks you're going below 40 airspeed, 40 knots, which is 40 knots. There's like a little conversion it'll tell you, but it's essentially, we'll just say somewhere around 60 mile an hour. If you're above that and that thing goes full down, when it goes full down, it starts catching that air, and we do what we call the lawn dart effect, where it just noses your aircraft straight to the ground. Luckily, that's not what happened. It failed to the flat position. It didn't think we were going 0 airspeed, which is great. But we got the capsule light, and I was like, hey, pull up the emergency checklist. But I'm pretty sure you just power on reset and you pray that everything clears up, and it was just a weird gremlin glitch, Of course, we pull it out. We're talking through it, and while he's doing that, I'm also checking. Russellville's right there. We know it's not a land immediately. It's a land as soon as practical, not as soon as possible. Hey, we're gonna get to Russellville. We're gonna land. We're gonna call back to base, to Camp Robinson, and just have a conversation. While doing so, he reads it, resets it. The capsule light on the bottom goes out, but on the master warning caution panel, it's still showing that there's it's still showing a state fail. And I was like, I don't know how much I like this, but we'll figure it out. So you only get 2 resets, and then after that, you just have to leave it in manual mode. Well, we didn't have to reset it because the capsule light didn't go out, but it's still showing on the screen. So we land. This is a weird one. It's not in the book. Well, so what do you do? So we call back. We talked it over with some maintenance guys, maintenance test pilots, and a few other stuff, and we got a one-time flight approved back to base, and essentially they told us, hey, when you take off, we know that's in auto, but if it does fail a second time, go ahead and manually slew it to 0 above 40 and just fly it back home manual, and then they'll figure out what's going on after the fact. All of that to say, I know it's a whole bunch of stuff to tell you, but all of that to say, in the heat of the moment, calm, cool, collected, we go through a thing called FADEC-F, fly the aircraft, so the person on the controls stays on the controls. They're monitoring outside, and they're also taking care of the radios, and they're trying to find a place to land. You announce or alert the crew. You diagnose what's wrong. You're going to execute whatever that emergency procedure is. You're going to communicate what's going on, both inside the aircraft and outside the aircraft. You need to be telling other people, if this is a no-joke, like a fire, I'd be calling, Mayday. Right. And you'd be getting down, whatever field you got. And then we call it FADEC-F. Well, guess what's the last thing to do? Fly the aircraft. Because what happens is people get caught up in a scenario where something's going on. No one's looking outside, and before you know it, they're CFIT, we're controlled flight into terrain. We're nosediving or we're hitting a tree or something because everyone's so focused on what's going on inside the cockpit and no one's actually flying. So, again, it's a ton of stuff, and I've had one happen in real life. And crew matters, coordination matters, and unfortunately, I had to say it, but like whatever your calmness level matters, your ability to work under stress. After the fact, I was like, holy, you get done, you go back to the table and you do you debrief with each other and talk about what happened. Yeah, after the fact, you're like, holy crap, that could have that could have been a terrible thing.
Right.
But everyone played their part, and it comes out. You come out on the other side with a little more appreciation. So and everyone, we always say there are those that have never had a PL and those that will. Like, you're gonna have something happen. There's just too much going on. If you ever make it in a 20, 30 year career and you've never had a PL, like I don't know, there's some guardian angel that has gotten you through that, because I don't think I've ever seen it.
Right.
It's just a big thing. It's crazy, and again, it happens. It can happen to anyone at any time. It's really on you to do your due diligence as the pilot or the co-pilot. Also, don't be an auto-log. Just because you're not the pilot in the command, if you're the co-pilot, you should be striving to be a pilot in command, so you should be out there trying to do all the right things too and be prepared to make those answers and know what the right answer is. And like I said, some of that's a gray area. Like, there's nothing in the book where it says, well, if one light stays on, the other one doesn't. Like, do X, Y, and Z. You're like, Now it's your best judgment, or what you call back and see what you can and can't do.
22.
All right.
Eyes ain't so good.
I do got one last question though, and okay. I'm always really interested in this. What have you took away from the military and all your experience that you've had that helps you not only be a good father but a family member?
I would say that patience and being objective about things, not rushing with emotion or trying to push my own agenda or opinion is probably one of the biggest things that I've learned. When you join the military, you work with so many different people with so many different backgrounds of every race, color, and creed. You learn to be very objective. And I think Jocko even talks about it at one point, right? Like, you're in a scenario, you need to step back, take pause, and like kind of look at the battlefield as it's growing around you.
Yeah.
You can do the same thing with all aspects of life, and you can also like have your own sets of morals and values that you don't break personally. Like, I have my own code of ethics that I do, but it should still be able to, generally speaking, align with others, and being able to work through that. Like, hey, just because me and you don't have the exact same belief system doesn't mean we can't universally agree on some morals and ethics and come to a good decision making process here. Also, being flexible, because like my childhood and how I grew up being in the woods and being away from a lot of the other things may not be the same thing as the guy from New York that's in basic training and he's struggling. Or you're in SEER school and this kid's from Chicago and he's never had to deal with cutting up animals and learn how to live off the land and being able to identify what poison ivy looks like. So, being able to engage with those people and have those discussions, I think that works great in family life as well, because, you're going to have to work with your spouse and make compromises there to some degree. Hopefully y'all still have generally speaking, a similar moral and ethical structure and base and foundation for your marriage, but also understand, like, that's going to flow through with everything, with how you interact with your extended relatives, how you interact with those in your household, how you want to raise your children. And discipline has come a long way too. Like, my thought process, again, is not always being the hammer. Not everything's a nail. You don't have to be necessarily hard on your kids. But do the right thing. Teach them how to be righteous in their decision-making process, and teach them, the way to do things. But you don't necessarily have to just berate them. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be a physical punishment. You don't have to whip your kids. There are multiple avenues, and you just got to kind of figure out what works for you. Being adaptive and being open-minded, I think, is it makes the family, makes it more diverse. It makes you able to more adaptable for those people around you, because everyone's going to be different. And so I'm not saying you should accept someone for every fault that they have if you don't agree, but you definitely shouldn't persecute them for it. You know, not saying you should travel down the same path they are, or, you know, or just let them go. Don't be an enabler for bad actions, but you can still love someone even when they're doing the wrong thing. And so having that patience and not necessarily flying off the handle or having an emotional reaction to everything is a big portion that I've learned. Because I can definitely tell you, like, ask any one of the soldiers that I work with, they say I'm generally speaking high strung, because I do want to do a really, really good job, and almost everything's time sensitive. And so I'm always out there like, hey, it's now, it's go time. That's how I work, is under pressure. But I'm also respectful. I'm not out there yelling at an E4. Like, there's no need. There's no need to they don't know, they're junior. You don't have to be a mean officer. You don't have to be a mean NCO. And again, not everything has to be a nail, man. Just be chill. Take a step back. Take a moment. I think that's a huge part of life, is learning when to gauge how your response needs to be, both inside and outside the family. And I think that works in both the professional aspect of life at corporate and here, even amongst friends. 100%, I guarantee you, y'all are not, you know, identical in all of your thought processes. But you can agree to disagree.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The Malaysia flight, that's one of them.
The Malaysia flight.
I can't tell you anything about that.
Don't worry, neither can I. This guy's
I can tell you a lot about it, but I can't tell you. I wasn't there, but I've read a bunch of stuff about it. But Lucas, I appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, man.
I've learned a lot, and we'll have to have you back on, because I know there's a lot more discussions that we can have about things. But yeah, this has been it's been beneficial to me. I've learned a lot, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, and good job. You didn't speak too much, as Bappa would say.
I know.
Yeah.
My grandpa has told me multiple times. He's like, "Hey, dude, you gotta stop talking so much on the podcast." So I was like, "Shout out to Bob. He'll never watch this," and which I don't even understand how he knows that, because he's like, "I've never watched any of your videos, but Mimi tells me you talk a lot," and I'm like, "Well, that's it." Well, you got John Boy. You want to leave us with anything?
Feels like that old segment we used to do.
Yep, you got the big brother looking over you as you do it.
What do I got for the people today? I hope that you watch this and it lays on you with open eyes and open ears, and that you take something away from it, as I hope with all of our episodes. And that's the best that I've got for today. Since we do have a service member on, I should say, if there's anybody out there who's curious, who's watching our episode, we personally know a recruiter, so if you know us personally, but also if it's something that you're thinking about, there's resources out there for you. So if that's an avenue for you, look into it, because we will continue to need good men and women to help our country. So just an idea. Thank you.
That's it. Guys, this has been Skeptics Podcast episode 29.
Yep.
And love all you guys, and hope you guys have a good one. We're out. See you guys.
Out.